I want to be on record and say, I think it's nonsense. I don't think change can be managed at all. It can be led, it can be facilitated, but you cannot put people through a process and expect or guarantee in any way that change will happen. In fact, the research, the anecdotal research says that 70% of all change projects done by these consulting firms do not achieve the results that they were intended to achieve. That's unbelievable to me. I'll start with a story because I'm a kind of a storyteller, and one of my first leadership development programs here in, I should tell Jürgen, sorry, but I do leadership programs. Wasn't that just fabulous? I just think that was just fabulous. But one of my first experiences here in 2008, when I first came to Poland, was I was doing a leadership program with a group of engineers from Siemens Corporation. 3.5 days, we have this 3.5-day, very intense personal development program for leaders. And it's a deep dive. So after the end of this program, one of the guys came up and I said to him, so how was this for you? And he said, Nieźle. And he walked away, and I turned to my friend Derek and I said, what does Nieźle mean? And he said, not bad. And I said, not bad? Geez, 3.5 days, you know. And Derek said, John, the guy just said you changed his life. And I said, well, why didn't he tell me? He said he did. He told you it was Nieźle. This is Poland, John. It's not California. That was one of my first experiences here. So I hope this is at least Nieźle for you. All right, just a little background. I came in 2008 for 6 months. But that was in August of 2008. Several months later, the entire economy in America collapsed. Did you know that? Nobody was hiring leadership consultants in the States anymore. And I thought, I'll stay for another 6 months until things turn around in America. Well, I'll stay for another 6 months until things turn around in America. Well, I'll stay for another 6 months. So after 2 years, I realized that I had friends, colleagues, and clients, that my tribe was really here. So I lived in Krakow, right down the street on Westerplatte for 8 years, and then last year I moved to Warszawa. So I'm now like a fox among the chickens. All my clients are in Warszawa. So here we go. My specialty is about facilitating change and transformation. It started out as facilitating transformation in individuals. I was a Gestalt therapist for a number of years, and then it morphed into relationships, marriage counseling, until my divorce, and then I figured I can't do marriage counseling anymore. Nobody in Poland laughs when I say that. It's a very serious thing, I guess. So anyway, my former wife and I are dear friends. We just don't live together anymore. And then the system kept getting bigger and bigger, families, and then finally organizations, and even the government of Canada, for instance, is a client of mine. So I've been doing this now for many years. Mam 77. So I'm 77. So I'm the next in line, I think, with all the old guys that were here. So here we go. Leading change. How many of you are right now either in a change process or just came out of a change process or have one coming shortly? Would you raise your hands, please? Okay. Is there anybody who isn't interested in change or every time I ask that question, almost every hand goes up. Here's what's happening. Years ago in history, you had these change. You can think about the rapids of change when you're going down the river in a canoe and you hit the rapids and everything goes into turmoil. Way back in history, you'd have this period in history of change and turmoil. Then you'd have long periods of peace and tranquility. Then you'd have another experience in the rapids of change. Then you'd have another, long period of tranquility, and then this upheaval again. Now what do we have? It's what my colleague Peter Vale calls permanent whitewater. permanent white water. You're in the rapids of change, then you're in the rapids of change, then you're in the rapids of change. There's no time between the changes. You're just going from one change situation to the next. Now, the irony of it is in organizations, change is seen as a problem to be solved, rather than a natural part of what happens to human beings trying to work together. Ironically, everything is changing all the time. Even rocks are changing. If you have a long enough time period, you can see the rocks changing. So people are just changing all the time. So why is change such a big problem? Let's get into that here. So everything has to change. There is a life cycle, as you know, to anything that's alive, and it looks like this. You have this embryonic stage, the startup phase. How many of you are in a startup situation right now? A few. Okay, great. Then the organization, in the startup phase, what's the attitude toward mistakes? Yeah. What's the attitude toward change? And do you have more questions or more answers? Everything at the beginning is unknown, right? In fact, a mistake might turn out to be a really cool idea. But then after a while, you begin to grow, and you go into the growth period. And then at some point, you grow, you scale, and then you go into the mature phase. Instantly, every time you cross one of these circles, the game changes. That's when we get called in as consultants for some reason, the organizations. When the new chapter starts, they need some help. In the mature phase, what's the attitude toward change? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Now the game is very different. Do you have more answers or more questions in the mature phase? And they're all written down. They're all the policies that Jürgen talked. Books and books and books full of policies, right? All right. And what's the attitude toward mistakes and change? It's the enemy. At some point, if you do not innovate, you're going to go down. I don't care how hard you try, you're going to go down. So this is the life cycle. I can feel it in my own body. I just got back from 9 days of yoga camp in Gdańsk. I've been doing yoga for many years. And after the second day, I couldn't get out of bed. I had to take an ibuprofen just to get up. And the third day, I thought a truck had run over me. My body was just... So things start to break down. I don't care how hard you try. So what happens is at some point, change needs to change from change to something else. At this point, when you get to some point in this cycle, usually organizations wait till they're over here, or over here, or over here. But at some point, somebody says, we need to change how we're doing things here. Not change how we do this line, but maybe we need to create a whole new way of thinking about what we're doing. And that's a different thing altogether, as you'll see. At this point, everybody goes back to zero. You go back and you say, now, why are we here? What's our purpose? What's our mission? What are we good at? Who are our customers? All the stuff you asked at the very beginning, you go back and you look at those again. And you say, okay, now given that, what are we trying to do? I think about the candle and the light bulb. What are we trying to do? We're trying to bring light to people. Well, are we going to work on making a better candle, work on the wax and the wick? Are we going to work on the wax and the wicks, or are we going to do something else? When you go back there, everybody goes back to zero. You might come up with different answers, as you'll see as we go forward. It's time to start what I call the breakthrough curve, which is transformation. Incremental change is getting better every day, which is absolutely crucial. You want everybody coming to work every day, trying to do everything better, cheaper, faster. And then you get somewhere and you realize we're doing better, cheaper, faster at the wrong thing. I'm going to tell you a quick story. This airplane took off from Rome, going somewhere. This is my Italian accent, not so good. And the pilot comes on after 2 hours. The pilot comes on the loudspeaker and he says, "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is your pilot speaking. I got some good news, some bad news. The bad news, we don't know where we are. The good news, we're going really, really fast." And most of the clients I'm working with, that's exactly where they are. Nobody knows exactly where we are or where we're going, but everybody's going and working as fast as they possibly can every day. Oh yeah, we're going faster and faster and faster. Only we have no idea what we're doing and why we're doing this. So if you think about this, though, that change process is very important. And it comes from nature. The bee, the honeybees. So po polsku bee? Pszcząt. That's as close as it's going to get. When a bee finds a new source of pollen, it flies back into the hive, and it starts doing a dance, right? Don't quit your day job, John. And the bee is doing a dance, and in that dance, the bee is actually communicating to the other bees the direction to the new pollen. It's accurate within about 10 or 15 degrees. It's based on the angle of the sun. And while the bee is dancing, he's going bzz, 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 bzz. And the frequency of the buzzes communicates to the other bees what the distance is to that new source of pollen. So that bee is saying, hey, I found some new pollen, and it's right over there. And so the queen says, are you all getting this? And they go, or whatever. And as soon as everybody's, she says, ho, and all the bees go off to find pollen. And when they do, the same thing happens every time. Only 85% of the bees follow the instructions. 15% of the bees go, and they go somewhere else. Now, it's not the same bees. It's not like you have this little group of bees, with an authority problem or something. It's different bees, but it's always 15%. Now, what would a naive observer accuse those 15%ers of? They're not listening, right? I know this in this part of the world people don't usually answer in a class because you might be wrong or something. I don't know. I found this out after 8 years. It doesn't surprise me. But yeah, people would say they're not communicated to the old hive here. They don't care. If you think about it for 2 seconds, what are those 15%ers doing? They're actually going to find the next source of pollen. They're guaranteeing the survival of the hive by looking not for the pollen that's known, but the pollen that's unknown. The bee that you step on in your yard is one of the 15%ers. It was just kind of checking things out. Very sad for that little bee. So who are the 15%ers? You probably, if you're in this conference, you're probably one of the 15%ers in your organization. So I tell all of our clients you want 85% of what everybody thinks about every day, what they worry about every day, what they talk about every day. You want 85% of it to be about how we're doing now. And you want 15% of what you talk about in your meetings, what you worry about and think about, to be about what's next. Otherwise, you're going to go, boom, and then you're going to get bought or sold, and then what happens when that happens. Now, there's two kinds of change it's very important to understand this. There's first order change, which is like going faster in first gear. It would be like making a better candle, to use the metaphor from this morning. Let's have the best candle we can make. I'm thinking about videotape. There was the VHS versus Beta. You all probably too young to remember that. But, Beta was a better tape. VHS had the better brand. VHS won. Or think about, how would you like to be in the CD production business right now? Printing CDs, stamping out CDs and selling them. It's all going to be, digital now. Who's going to want to buy I've got a stack of records. Nobody's going to buy records or CDs anymore. So this is getting better at something that might not be a really good idea anymore. But it's very important that everybody knows how to do first order change. How can I do this job faster? How can I do this job more effectively? And sometimes that's not enough, and you need second order change, you'll see in a minute. This is getting in a different vehicle or changing your destination or something very, very significantly different. You use change principles when only small changes are needed and you can stay within the existing paradigm. Okay? Because let me go back here. Because when you get here, This represents not only the lifeline of a product or the financial success of an organization, it represents the lifeline, the life cycle of an idea, of a way of doing something, of a process. So you need to apply this kind of thinking to everything, not just to products and to finances. So, transformation is altering the paradigm. It's changing the game. First order change is getting better at the game. Transformation is changing the game itself, and you see how that happens. Now, here's an example of how hard this is. I was working with a company that was doing, they were one of the first companies to put on a credit card, you could pay for your medical services with this credit card, and when they swiped the card, all of your medical data was on the magnetic strip. So everything got communicated on this card. Very innovative. But they were getting inundated. They were getting flooded with calls for help. They were selling it to doctors' offices and hospitals and places like that. And they had this group of women down in the basement on the phones at the help desk. And they were just, they were 8-hour shifts, and they were 24, and they couldn't get people. They were turning over. Nobody could stay. So I was doing this organizational change process with the company, and one of the issues was the self-help desk, was the help desk. So I took it on for myself. So I had about 12 or 15 people in this room from across the organization. I put a speakerphone in the middle of the table. I invited the CEO to come in, and I called the help desk. And so on the speaker, this woman says, yes, so-and-so, can you wait for a moment? Click, and she clicks off. So I started my watch. 15 minutes later, she comes on, she says, thank you for waiting. And I said, that's okay, we handled it. And the CEO he had smoke coming out of his ears, He was saying, does this happen all the time? And one of the people on the team said, yeah, the average wait time is about 17 minutes. Well, of course, he just went crazy. And that's why I did it. I wanted a demonstration, and he said, I don't care what it takes. You guys in this team, you fix it. I'll support whatever you come up with. And then he left. So now I'm going, inside I'm going, yeah, now we got support from the person that needs to have support. So then I said to the group, okay, what would be the ideal number of calls coming into the help desk? So they get out their calculators, and they start calculating, okay, you get 3, okay, I've got, believe me, if you were in that circle, you might not have gotten it so fast. Everybody gets it, and they're calculating, okay, we have 3 people now. If we had 6 people in 8-hour shifts, and they're doing all this calculation. And I go, wait, okay. But really, what's the ideal number of calls coming into the help desk? And I swear to God, they couldn't get it. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because they were in the paradigm. They were trapped in the paradigm that says we have to multiply the number of people here in order to respond to the calls coming in. And they didn't think we could turn the whole thing around and go up to the front end and say, how could we reduce the number of calls coming into the help desk? And then finally somebody said, well, John, I guess the ideal number would be 0, but we could never get there. And I said, why not? He said, well, first of all, and I said, okay, start writing. First of all, the salespeople would have to do a very different job of selling. Secondly, the training. So we had this whole list of the people installing the work, the trainers, all this kind of. There was a whole list of about 10 things that would have to happen if you wanted the calls coming in to be 0. Now that is transformational thinking. Do you understand the difference? And so I went back a few months later as a part of this project, and they had one woman down there doing her nails. No, that's not true. But they just almost cut the calls down to practically anything. But it took that kind of thinking to make. That's transformational thinking. Okay, so here we go. When an organization is ready for change and transformation, what are these moments? I'm going to give you some right now. First of all, when you're hiring people and when you're firing people, everybody notices and says, what kind of people are getting hired and fired? These are moments when when the culture is more vulnerable to change. So if you're now trying to change your organization, these are moments to look for, when you're hiring and when you're firing. People watch that. Secondly, when you're planning, what makes it into the plan? When you're budgeting, what makes it into the budget? What's being cut? Where's the money going? These are all moments when you can create change, make a small change, At this level, it makes a huge change downstream. When you're responding to a crisis, do you all remember the Tylenol crisis? I don't know if you had it over here. Tylenol is like a pain pill, and somebody was opening the packages and putting poison in the Tylenol pack and putting them back on the shelf. So several people died, and it was like it just scared everybody. So nobody was buying Tylenol. You know, the company stock just went in the tank. And the way that company responded to that was really transformational thinking. They didn't do PR like, all the, pumping all the BS that goes out. The CEO said, this is a tragedy. We don't know how it happened. We're going to stop. We're going to throw away all the Tylenol that's on all the shelves. We're going to start from scratch, and we're going to put in these safety things. And they lost, I don't know, millions of dollars. But man, their stock went up, their reputation went up, and they just climbed out of that in a big hurry. That was transformational thinking. And also, when you're responding for a request for help, what happens when someone in your organization says, "We need help"? What happens? How does the organization respond? That tells you what the real paradigms are about here, what's really important here. All right? Do people get help? Do they get ridiculed? Do they get, I'd like a new computer. I love that. The boss looks at the budget and says, no, you don't need a new computer. What a great measure of that. So what I'd like to do is have you, I'm going to take just 2 minutes right now, so I can talk really fast. Find a strange person sitting next to you. Okay, if you don't have any strange people, there are a couple up here in the front that you can talk to. And I'd like you to just talk very quickly. Pick one of those, hiring and firing, budgeting, planning, and say, which one of those has made a difference in your company in the last year? Which one of those has been had most leverage when it comes to making a change that you have noticed? Very quickly, just one of you. Ready? 3, 2, 1, go. So when you go back to your organization, if you want to start making change happen, look for these moments. When hiring and firing, when you're budgeting, when you're planning, when people down below are requesting help, or when there's a crisis coming from outside. See if you can position yourself to make even a small change in one of those moments of truth, and that will leverage impact across the organization. But now I want to move from sort of participating in ongoing change, and I want to take a look at what I came here to this part of the world to educate as many people as possible. How do you initiate change? How do you make change happen in a team even, or in an organization, or a marriage? Same principles apply. It's just a little more complex as you get down to the marriage. It's more complicated. But as you go up to I've done this process with a 120,000 person organization in 25 states in America, and an 8-person dental office, Same principles apply. And I want to show you as many of them as I can here. The first has to do with what I call the waterline, and it goes like this. This is the way change is usually planned. This is where we are. This is where we want to be, and we have a process for getting there. It looks really, really great. This is the change management process. All the consulting firms now have this thing they call change management. I want to be on record and say, I think it's nonsense. I don't think change can be managed at all. It can be led, it can be facilitated, but you cannot put people through a process and expect or guarantee in any way that change will happen. In fact, the anecdotal research says that 70% of all change projects done by these consulting firms do not achieve the results that they were intended to achieve. That's unbelievable to me. How would you like to go to the doctor and say, I'd like some help, and the doctor says, we got this operation we're going to do on you. You got about a 25% chance of survival. Oh, okay, yeah, put me in, doc. I don't know how the salespeople do it for those consulting firms. I'm impressed they can go in and sell that. This is about process. You see the Gantt charts. You have budgets and projects. This is called the hard stuff in a change process. But what people don't realize is, and this is one of my buddies who's in the American military, a general, he said, Johnny, you got to tell people planning is priceless. The plan itself is useless. Because when you plan for a battle, how long does your battle plan survive? It survives until initial contact with who? The enemy. You plan a budget, right? We have this one finance person. I don't know if she's in here, but anyway. How long does your budget... Well, when you put the budget together, it's perfect, isn't it? You have a project plan. You got benchmarks. You got all these, you got these things laid out. When you put your plan together, it's perfect. It's on time and on budget. On paper, as it were, it's on time and on budget every time. Until you turn that over to human beings, and then God only knows what's going to happen, right? The plan itself is useless, but you have to plan. Why? Because there's what I call the waterline that exists. Above the waterline, you have this operational world. This is the hard stuff. Below the waterline, you have human beings interacting with each other or not interacting with each other in order to make the stuff above the waterline happen. And this is often called the soft stuff. But I say no, this is actually the harder stuff. If this is the hard stuff up here, this is the harder stuff down here. And most of the business schools and most of the consulting firms go like this. They go like this. That's what they teach. And the truth is, your change project is going to succeed or fail if people do it. The PowerPoint slides don't do anything except give people a map of what to do. Everything else happens down here, and this is the harder stuff. You can lead change, but it can't be managed. So let's figure out how to do this. So above the waterline, you have this org chart. Below the waterline, you have this network of people who get together and they have relationships and they do stuff. You don't ever say, if you're trying to accomplish something, you rarely go to the org chart. You usually say, who do I know over there in that department that I can talk to? Am I right? You work your network of people that you trust. Because above the waterline, you have accountability. Below the waterline, you have accomplishment. And this is what you have to do. So if you're going to be in a change project, you have to work below the waterline. That's the principle here. All power to accomplish flows through relationship. So let's say this person is the vice president of marketing, and this person is the vice president of sales. And they're talking to each other. What do you have going on above the waterline? You have the vice president of marketing, Eva, talking to the vice president of sales. So above the waterline, you have the vice president of sales talking to the vice president of marketing. You understand what I'm saying? These two titles are talking to each other, and they have those hats on. But while that's going on, at the same time, in stereo, what's actually happening below the waterline? Who's talking below the waterline? Well, Eva and Piotr, right? These two people are talking. What's the quality of their relationship? How much respect and trust do they have for each other? What's the bandwidth in their relationship? And all of that human stuff determines what kind of operational communication is going on above the waterline. A change process that's successful has to transform the way people connect with each other. Relationships this way and relationships this way. It's all about relationship. If you try to create a change process and you just rely on logic, look, see how good it's going to be? I wouldn't bet anything on it. You get people in a room and start getting them to talk about the change process and some other process, and now you're talking. Above the waterline, you have positions. Below the waterline, you have people. All right. Here's what to expect. You go and you start a change process. What you have above the waterline is everybody's trying to look really committed. Yep, we're here. First thing that happens when you announce the change, people say, I can't say it here, but you know what they say, WTF. They go, no, you're sure about these? No, that can't be true. That's absolutely, they're in denial. It's like, this is just, no. We're going to be bought by who? We're going to do what? We're going to now go this way? You can't be kidding. Then the next thing is a kind of no, man, we're going to dig in. We're going to fight it. And then eventually you get to what I call grudging acceptance. Like, okay, I've got a job. Do I have a door? Do I have an office? Do I have a window in my office? Like, Who's my new boss? You start getting that way, and then at some point, if everything works right, you get to full commitment. All right? Now, here's a real interesting thing. The leadership team, this is why Jürgen's really right about this. The leadership team has to go through this process. They go through shock and denial. So all the C-level people, the owners, they go, what? Well, okay, let's do it. So now finally after, I don't know, a year, they're at full commitment. And they then announce it to the troops. And where do the troops start? Over here. And what do the C-level people say? Why are they so resistant? And I say to them, well, how long did it take you guys to go over there? Oh, yeah, about a year. Well, could you give these people like a week, you know? A month maybe to help them go across that line? So I've got about 12 minutes left. I want you to turn to that person next to you, and I want you to answer this question. Let's say you're on the receiving end of a change announcement. What do you need to have that helps you move through this cycle here? What are 2 or 3 things that you think would help people go from shock and anger all the way over to full commitment? What do you think it takes? Talk about it with your partner. Ready, go. So if you're going to be part of a change process in your organization, you need to think like the people at the bottom. Don't think like the people at the top. I'll show you in a minute how different those two worlds are. Do everything you can. What are some of the things that would help people move across here? What's one thing? Communication. Another great question. From whom? A person that has answers and that the people trust. Okay? Because sometimes those two don't go together. What else? Information. What else? Context. Tell us why we're doing this. Give us the business reasons. Give us the big picture. Don't try to sell us on how great it's going to be, but explain why the context is right. What else? Say again? To accept the needs of the people. Listen to them. You know, the inmates don't want to run the prison. That's what the C-level people tell me. Well, why do we want to ask them? They're not going to get to run this thing. Do you want them to change or not? Well, I'd like for them to change. And then I usually use the golden rule. How would you want to be treated if you were in their shoes? What would you like to know? Well, I'd want to know everything as soon as possible. Go for it. You got to trust those people. You got to tell them good stuff as soon as possible. Give them one more thing that's needed. Time, absolutely. Time. What else?
What's there for them, and what's there for the company, and what's there for
exactly. Why it's good for the company, and what's the truth? What's the truth going to be? And
matter of consequences.
exactly. Instead of saying it's going to be wonderful, what I coach the C-level people to do is say, you know what, this is going to be tough. This is going to be a challenge. It's going to be hard. Now, the truth is, although it's difficult for people at the bottom to believe this, in a reorg or an M&A, everybody's going to be affected. Not everybody at the C-level. If it's a merger, there's going to be some C-level people coming in and replacing. You understand what I'm saying? Not everybody's going to have a job. So everybody from the top down is going to have some anxiety. They're going to be over here to some extent. And it's real important for the C-level people to understand that and not just get arrogant about it. Arrogansky. Okay, so here's what oh, by the way, in an M&A, the reason they fail, all the effort went into the A and not enough went into the M. The acquisition got all the attention, the merger didn't. You understand what I mean by that? The merger of the two cultures, the merger of the systems didn't happen. Everybody looked at the synergies and so forth and changing the, as you'll see. Here's what it looks like to the planners. We're going to take organization A, we're going to slam it together with organization B, we're going to come out with a new, leaner, more profitable organization C. Isn't that fabulous? It's what I call changing the chart. Okay? Well, that should work, shouldn't it? Actually, no, because meanwhile, below the waterline, this is what you have happening. This is what it looks like above the waterline, right? They've all got great charts. Below the waterline, you have relationship infrastructure A, which gets merged with infrastructure B. You end up with a new, shredded, does that translate? Torn, shredded, demoralized relationship infrastructure. This is the result below the waterline. we call that changing the heart. What's needed is focus on changing the heart. So the view from above, that plus that plus that. They get the new chart. Everybody's excited at the sea level. We did it. No. The change isn't over. The change is what? It's just starting. Once the new organization, once the new idea is formulated, the change isn't over. The change is just starting. And some time and attention has to be paid. This has to be paid attention to. And most people say it takes 3 to 5 years until you get a new one. Now, this is where I make my money. This is where my work is in how to. I swam the butterfly in college. This one here, you know, where you go like that, 200-meter butterfly. So what we do is help the organization weave these two together so that you're paying attention to both levels. You have to focus on that. That's the easy part. You get 3 or 4 smart people in a room, you can change the chart in about, a couple hours. This one is really, really hard. That's why this is the hard stuff and this is the harder stuff. So if you want to be an architect of change, you need to do both. Now, what I want to do now is ask you again for just a couple minutes with your partner. In the change process that either you're in now or one that you just came out of, what percentage out of 100 would you say, how much attention was paid to what was happening in changing the chart, and how much attention was spent or is being spent on changing the heart? So changing the chart and changing the heart. What's the percentage of effort or attention that went into those two? Ready? Ready, go. How many people had, let's say, 50% or more of the attention going into changing the chart above the waterline? Okay? How many of you had 50% or more going into changing the heart? Wow, that's why you're all at this conference. Why did you come to this workshop? You guys are doing fine. You've got to be weaving these two together. I want to take the last 3 minutes that we have and do a little bit of a Q&A. I've been in this work for 40 years, and talking to C-level people about how to do this in a way that works has been very, very challenging. Because the big 4 consulting firms use a process and they have the brand, they have the reputation. And the fact is that how to do this in a way that works, like I actually know how to have the change be more likely to succeed. But it's using principles that are not intuitively known to C-level people. And so this is what I came here to do. So I'm about wanting to educate as many people as possible. In fact, I was thinking about doing a weekend workshop on how to do this. If that would be helpful, maybe I could do that with Yusuf. So let me take a couple minutes now to answer any questions or get any comments here. Yes?
How to make this 3-5 years to...
How do you reduce the 3 to 5 years? That's what the weekend would be about. Okay. All right. So, okay. What you do is my secret method is to create an internal team. That's what I call a diagonal slice. Somebody at the top that reports to the boss but isn't the boss. And you want one person on that team that represents each functional area and each level. So anybody looking at it from the organization would say there's somebody on there that kind of understands my world. And then my colleagues and I work with that team, and we train that team to go out and do all the facilitation. So instead of the consulting firm coming in, the people inside the organization are doing the work. So when they see their colleagues in front of the room leading the workshop on, like, the first thing is to do a workshop, get ready for change, and then quite often we'll do a thing called tough conversations for managers. How do you fire somebody with respect? How do you let people go? All these things that are going to happen during the process. So one of our secrets is to work with an internal team to do that. And that, I mean, just doing that does tremendously. What else? Yes?
How to reduce this 3-5 years?
Was this your question? Or oh,
In a marriage.
in a marriage? I don't know. I have no idea. I used to know. Actually, it's easier when there's just 2 people. But
That's why most of the marriages divorce.
50%. You know what I think? I was in the Navy. I was actually a combat officer in the Navy back in the 60s, 1960s. When 2 ships take off from a port, let's say they're only a half a degree of difference in their course. Okay, after 2 or 3, 1,000 kilometers, they're going to be, one of them's going to be in England, the other one's going to be off the coast of Africa. So when two people get married or in a relationship, you have to keep coming together. You have to keep getting remarried. My wife, Catherine, and I were married for 25 years, and she's an amazing person. And we figured we were divorced and married 3 times during that 25 years. You know what I'm saying? I mean, like something was happening and we said, time out. Who are we now? So you get married with one understanding, just like joining a company. There's an emotional contract, a psychological understanding. This is who I'm marrying. And then one person starts developing and the other person gets left behind slightly. So how do you keep catching up with each other over the course of a marriage? So I think in a country like you're in, where the church is so strong, the secret of the lower divorce rate is that somebody goes off, but nobody, it's really hard to, you don't want the social stigma of having a divorce. So I think there are probably a lot of marriages where there really isn't anything, it isn't real anymore, or it isn't mutually beneficial anymore. But you still have a piece of paper in a drawer that says you're married, you're still in the house, but really you're not married in the sense of what you think a marriage could be. Well, I didn't think we were going to get to that question there. Well, time is up. Thank you so much. The thing about change, it has to happen. Thank you. Maybe that last 2 minutes was for somebody in the room here, so